For now, let's talk about some of the injuries that we're looking at here. And thankfully, according to Rams coach Sean McVay, they expect Cooper Kupp to play in Week 9 after hurting his ankle late in the game against the 49ers. Bad decision by Sean McVay to keep Kupp out there. He knows that, and so hopefully Kupp will be 100% against the Bucs. John Harbaugh gave us some updates. We'll talk about it on Mark Andrews, Gus Edwards, Rashad Bateman, some good, some bad. We'll get to that in a minute. Keenan Allen not at practice on Monday, coming off a bye, not necessarily a good thing for him. Chuba Hubbard hoping to play in Week 9. We'll see what that means for Deontay Foreman. And the Chiefs are going to work Kadarius Tony in slowly after acquiring him from the Giants in the trade late last week. So let's start with the Rams situation. Heath, Cooper Kupp looks like he's going to go. No hesitation to start him there. But just in the scenario that he does not play, what do we see from Matthew Stafford, from Allen Robinson, Tyler Higbee, maybe Van Jefferson? Anybody of interest to you if there is no Cooper Kupp?
I'm not sure anything would change with Matthew Stafford. I don't want to start him with Cooper Kupp. I certainly don't want to start him without Cooper Kupp. He would, I guess, maybe not even be a number 2 quarterback in that scenario. I do think you'd have to give a little more of a boost to Allen Robinson. Now, I hate the idea of Allen Robinson with the defense actually paying attention to him, but he would go from being a low-end number 3 wide receiver to maybe a high-end number 3 wide receiver. Not bad touchdown odds in that scenario. I think we'd maybe see Tyler Higbee get more involved in the passing game. He only ran 15 routes this week, and so you'd feel more confident in him as a starting tight end, but you're probably starting him either way.
All right, we'll see what happens there in terms of Kupp hopefully being good to go. That's the expectation as of now, so you don't have to worry about replacing him as of Tuesday. Let's talk about the Ravens, Dave. So John Harbaugh says that Mark Andrews is expected to be fine after leaving with the shoulder injury last Thursday night and should be good to go. Remember, they play on Monday, so we're not going to get a practice report until Thursday for them, but sounds like Andrews should be okay. If not, you want to pick up Isaiah Likely just as a precaution in case Andrews can't go. Rashad Bateman's expected to miss, quote, a few weeks, according to John Harbaugh, with the foot injury, so you could probably drop him in your fantasy leagues because the Ravens have a bye in week number 10. And Gus Edwards is considered day-to-day, so hopefully he's going to be able to go. As you see, there has a chance for Monday Night Football against the Saints. So we'll start with the running back situation. If there is no Gus Edwards, how much do you like Kenyon Drake?
I like him in terms of a running back who I know is going to play, has a pulse, and might see as many as 13 touches in the game. I don't necessarily love the matchup for him against the Saints. I thought the Saints defense looked really outstanding last week. And we've seen Drake have some really huge games, and we've seen him have some really terrible games. He could land anywhere in between, probably be on the cusp of a low-end number 2 fantasy running back.
The nice thing about Drake is in those productive games, 2 of his last 3, averaging over 8 yards per carry. He had 4 catches last week against the Bucs, so maybe those type of things can carry over to this game against New Orleans if in fact they need him. Justice Hill would obviously be somebody who can pick up some slack as well. Heath, when it comes to Devin Duvernay and Demarcus Robinson, 2 guys who stepped up without Rashad Bateman last week, what's your interest level in those 2 guys, knowing now Bateman's going to be out week 9, by week 10, maybe he's back week 11, but might not be back for a few weeks, as according to John Harbaugh. So what do you look like for the receiving options there in Baltimore?
I do prefer Duvernay over Demarcus Robinson just because he's done a little bit in the running game, and we've seen him score touchdowns but more early this year than we did Robinson. I think both of them are either number 3 wide receivers or flexes. It's really tough to trust Duvernay after the last time we were without Rashad Bateman. Pumped him up into the top 25 wide receivers, and he completely let us down. So neither of these guys are sure things, but a slight lead to Duvernay.
Yep, and again, it's more of a long-term situation. Now, Bateman, we were hoping to be back week to week at that point, but again, according to Harbaugh, we may not have him for week 9 and beyond, depending on how bad this foot injury is. Let's talk about the Chargers. So Keenan Allen not at practice on Monday. Not a huge deal yet because they're just coming off their bye week. So by the time we get to Wednesday, hopefully have Keenan Allen back out there. But again, the fact that it's been this lingering hamstring injury. Last time we saw him in week 7, he had a snap count limited. Was on a snap count. Excuse me. So we'll see what happens for him this week. Mike Williams not expected to go. So Dave, when we look at the Chargers passing game here, if there is no Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, what do you feel about Justin Herbert? And then talk about the guys that could be replacing those guys in terms of Joshua Palmer and Gerald Everett as the 2 main options in the passing game.
I really like those 2 options. Palmer is certainly going to be a popular waiver wire ad. He might even be your number 1 claim this week if you don't need a running back or if you just don't like Kenyon Drake. So keep an eye out on him because he's going to end up getting a lot of targets. And so too will Gerald Everett. And we've seen the Chargers morph into an offense that is willing to use multiple tight ends on the field at a time. We actually saw that from them last year. And I think they would go back to that this year because they're so depleted at wide receiver. So I think Everett's a must-start tight end in week number 9. I think Palmer, especially if there's no Keenan Allen, would also make the cut as a top 30-ish type of wide receiver. As for Justin Herbert, I think you're starting him by default as a top 10 quarterback, but not somebody who's got that top 5 upside.
especially if there is no Williams and no Keenan Allen. But again, we do expect Keenan Allen to play. The nice thing about Josh Palmer and Allen, Falcons allow the most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, and they're pretty bad against tight ends as well. So
pretty
good opportunity for Gerald Everett and Josh Palmer to get in there. And this is why we're telling you last week, pick up Josh Palmer ahead of this week so that you were ahead of the waiver race to go get him if, in fact, he is going to be one of the more popular targets. Heath, Chuba Hubbard hoping to get back on the field. We've seen Deontay Foreman be a star the last 2 games. Last week was a monster performance with over 100 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. So give me the breakdown of the Carolina backfield. Hubbard in, Hubbard out. What do you think of Foreman with or without his running mate?
I would like for Chuba Hubbard to make sure he's healthy. I do not want him to have a chance to get hurt. Let's just give Deontay Foreman a couple more weeks. It gets a little bit complicated if Hubbard, especially if he's a full go this week, because it did seem like until he got hurt that they wanted Hubbard to be the lead guy and Foreman to spell him. With what Foreman's done over the last 2 weeks, I can't sit him even if Hubbard is active. He'll be a low-end number 2 running back if Hubbard is active. Foreman will be a high-end number 2 running back if Hubbard is not available. I think you could view Hubbard, if he's a full go, as a high-end flex, even starting Foreman. There have been a lot of touches available for running backs in this offense and a lot of fantasy points.
We saw it in the game against Tampa Bay, Week 7, the first one without Christian McCaffrey. Both guys were successful. Hubbard did leave the game in the 3rd quarter, so we'll see what that means for him coming back. But I agree, knowing that there's so many teams on a bye this week, so many star running backs on a bye. If they're both playing, you could start potentially both of them, and just make sure that Hubbard is not rostered. 71% roster percentage on CBSSports.com leagues. All right, so Dave, we got the report that the Chiefs are going to work in Kadarius Tony slowly in his potential debut. Not a guarantee he's going to play. So A, should we be running to pick up Kadarius Tony, who is within the range of guys? He's right about 40% available on CBSSports.com leagues. And if he does play, who suffers?
I think Valdez-Scantling will be the one who suffers the most. I think McCole Hardman might suffer as well, and maybe even Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, we're talking about a wide receiver in Kadarius Tony who is lightning on the field. When he's got the ball in his hands, he makes defenders miss like crazy, but we also know that he has a hard time staying healthy. So there's a lot of risk-reward here. If I'm looking long-term in my fantasy league, Tony's a priority for me off the waiver wire to stash on my bench and see what happens.
All right, so we'll see who he impacts. You could have an opportunity to pick up MVS, to pick up Mecole Hardman, hopefully Juju with what he was doing prior to the bye. Nothing happens there. Clearly Travis Kelce should be fine. But Tony, a good stash. It sounds like they may not play him very much, if at all, in this game. So just keep that in mind.